Now go home and get your fucking shine box.
All right.
Biggie, biggie, biggie.
All right. All right. All right. You see PK. You see PK's going on tour.
Oh yeah, first time in like 14 years or something like that, isn't it?
And there's no London dates, which is it's really funny.
What? Why has he done that?
I don't know if they're gonna come out at a later point, but it's really funny if he just never does any London dates. It's just funny, yeah. Just fuck it. I'm just gonna go Bolton, Sunderland, Manchester, Glasgow, Cardiff, whatever. Just avoid London. Yeah, I rate that.
Fuck the South tour, yeah. All right.
I rate that as a joke. It's like, yeah, we're not gonna keep this not gonna keep this London centric anymore.
No,
Yeah,
do you know who I'm going to go see on tour?
Who?
Dick and Dom in the Bungalow.
What?
They're doing a live
actually?
tour. Yeah, they're doing a live tour, and it's like starting in a couple of months, and I'm going to see them in April next year.
What do you mean? I know they
Sick.
DJ, but what are they doing?
It's just like they're making the bungalow in like set on the stage wherever they go, and they just bring like 20, 30-year-olds. That's who it's aimed at. They just bring them out from the stage, and just fuck them up. Probably dunk and stuff, make them fight, whatever. Play games, mini games, probably a bit of stand up. I don't know. Should be.
Oh, that's actually quite fun.
Well,
An adult in the bungalow.
Yeah, it's like 30 quid ticket. So, and it's in
Where
Bath.
is
Sick.
Not even that far.
It's in a bath. That's weird.
It's in Bath.
They're doing it in the bath. Bit gay.
You can't do a show in the bath, Jay. The guests
show
will get wet. The show. They're gonna play bogeys.
I don't see how they can. Because everyone will just shout it back.
This is a pre-recorded jobby.
Oh, God.
Go to whatever's next door and play it. Don't know. The show that's taping next door. The Royal Symphony Opera or something. Play bogeys.
Bittersweet Symphony.
Do you notice we're doing Incredibles, even though you did the watch along?
Yeah, I noticed
Oh
that.
yeah. It's because it's such a good film, we had to do it twice.
Did you remember
So
that you
nice.
did the watch along?
We had to do it twice. Yeah, I did
Yeah, I
actually.
remember.
I was thinking about that earlier.
Yeah, I did it for 2 hours. I remember doing it.
Because
Yeah.
I did until I turned it on. Until I turned Incredibles on a couple of days ago. It's like, oh yeah, we had that watch along. Yeah, I remember that.
It's still
That's
like one
weak.
of the most elite animated films.
There was another film we've done twice in like the two iterations of the show. I can't remember. Well, I'm pretty sure there was one we did like as part of like the 4 films that we used to do, and then we did it as like a head-to-head later on. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I told you that we did, and you were like, "No, we didn't," even though we definitely did.
For what?
The other day we were arguing about it. Like I was like, "We definitely." You're like, "There's no way." There was like you were adamant there was no way that we'd ever done a film we'd already done before. And
No, I like
now,
doing
now that you thought it's your idea, you're like, "Yeah, we've definitely."
Was it that time? Was it Ross's idea? And I thought it was mine. I was like,
yeah, you were like, I don't know where I come up with those ideas. I was like, hang on.
You don't.
It's so funny.
This week was my idea as well. Before you try and take it, by the way.
No, it wasn't.
It was. This was Ross's idea this week.
No, it wasn't.
He invented Wakanda Forever. He knew that.
Yeah.
I invented Spider-Man, so fuck you.
All right, we should start because Ross has got to go. Wait, where are you going, Ross?
Oh yeah. Football.
Football.
Is it every week?
It's-
Jeez.
Well, it's not the Carabao Cup every week, mate.
I hope so. I hope not.
Who's it? Flobberaki versus Marshalltown.
Yeah, exactly. Stevenage versus Charlton.
That's what weird names. Did you see the Charlton game the other day when they were 2 at home to I think it was Ipswich. They were 2-0 down, go back to 2-2. Ipswich scored 2 goals in stoppage time to go 4-2 up. Then Charlton scored 2 more goals in stoppage time and they drew 4-4.
Oh yeah, that's
It's
mad.
fucking insane.
I did see that. I haven't seen the highlights, but that's mental. What was it the Boca Juniors Racing the other day? You had how many?
Oh, yeah. 11?
Stupid. Something like that.
What is it? If you get these
I
7,
thought
they have
once
to
it goes to like 7 asides.
Yeah.
Or something of it.
I only know that from playing Pez, and you like try to get as many red cards as possible, and then the game would just stop, and you lose 3-0. The head-to-head. What was that noise?
What?
But it was just, oh, yeah, it was that. Yeah.
It's Rolf Harris in the background.
Oh yeah, that's funny advert. Animated superheroes. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse versus The Incredibles. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Teen Miles Morales becomes the Spider-Man of his universe, and must join with 5 spider-powered individuals from other dimensions to stop a threat for all realities. Okay. First impressions of this this landmark in animation history, I think. Matty, would you agree?
What film was it?
Uh,
Miles Morales.
yeah,
You don't know.
yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say it's well suited to go against Incredibles this week, just because it feels like that set apart from other films that are kind of coming out at this time. Because going to watch it was one of the biggest surprises of any film that I've seen. I easily watched it. I think when I first saw it, another four or five times in that 2 weeks, just because it was so different. It was so kind of like it's like it's leaping off the page of a comic book, but it still has kind of all the seriousness of a film, and it steps leagues above a lot of the other superhero films as well, I think. And it probably placed like in the top 5 superhero films for me, just because of its originality. And yeah, it's just quite, I don't want to say it's groundbreaking, because obviously it's not doing new things, but it's doing things that have been done before, but very, very well. And I think Incredibles, you can kind of compare that to it, even though they're two equally different styled films.
Ross, Spider-Man Into Spider-Verse. What are you saying?
Yeah, it's quite incredible what they managed to kind
Incredible. Pardon the pun.
of hey. It's what they managed to achieve with it. Like I think bringing it kind of, I know they did it with the Tom Holland ones, but bringing it down to like a teenager kind of level and making him um right from the very start and not understanding Spider-Man as kind of what he needs to do and his powers and whatnot, and having like a coming of age learning that throughout the film is like it's really effective within the whole thing. And like obviously the animation is a big standout, and how they've made it like a comic book movie, but because we've seen tons of comic book movies, but this is one where it actually looks like a comic book and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's incredible movie.
This movie's just it's just really cool, no? Just the hip hop soundtrack, the visuals, everything about it, the way it was made, the kind of characters they're exploring. There's a biracial kid at the center of everything about it. It's just a dope film. I think enjoyed it the first time. Like you say, Matt, like you say, Matt, a big surprise seeing it in the cinema, just how like kind of impressive it was. Wasn't expecting something like this to come around. Kind of with all these superhero films coming out, you kind of when something you never really expected something this unique to come around, because it's so samey at the moment. But yeah, blew me away first time. Still plays, still goes hard on this. I don't know what rewatch this was, maybe 5 or 6, I'm not sure. And it's up against The Incredibles. While trying to lead a quiet suburban life, a family of undercover superheroes are forced into action to save the world. Here we go. Big one. Matt and Ross, you shared your thoughts on this in the old watch along. It must have been like 2 years ago at this point. Anything you didn't bring up on that episode from what you can remember that you want to share now as you give your first impressions on The Incredibles, Ross?
I don't really remember what we talked about, but we probably did touch on it. But I think it's kind of amongst us three anyway. Like we, well, I don't know, I'm pretty sure anyway that it's one of the best superhero movies of all time because it came out at a time where there was no Marvel like, oh well, apart from the Sam Raimi movies, Spider-Man movies, there wasn't much about in terms of superhero movies of like this much quality. And I think at the center of it being about the family rather than kind of good versus evil, it is just such a kind of well, yeah, pardon the pun, incredible movie, just like Spider into the Spider-Verse is. Um, you know, like all four kind of main characters have a certain element to it, and that's developed. Obviously the Mr. Incredible being the center of it, his nostalgia kind of getting in the way of his sense almost, and him coming to his senses throughout the movie. It's a really really good story, say about with the family being kind of like the center theme rather than the good versus evil, which I think is so effective in the overall kind of story and plot.
Watching it the other day, I'm not sure when the last time when was the last time I rewatched it. I think it's been quite a few years, I think. But watching the other day, I was just like shocked how just how impressive it was. On a story level, on a visual level, considering it's coming up to like nearly 20 years since the first Incredibles, and it's still there's nothing about it that aged poorly in terms of the look or the story or anything about it. Which, considering this is only what 9 years after the first like 3D, after Toy Story comes out, first 3D animation from Pixar, and they could have made The Incredibles, if that was made last year, you wouldn't have noticed any difference. You wouldn't have thought, oh, that looks out of place. It feels like a contemporary film. So I was just shocked by how fucking good this shit was. Incredible. It's just good stuff, quality stuff.
I think as well the era that it came out in around, was it 2004? I'm pretty sure one of the first films you kind of remember actually being able to remember. Like, I don't know, when I obviously saw, like, my parents think they took me to saw one of the Batman films when I was like 1 years old in cinema. I was like, obviously I'm not going to remember that. Pretty pointless waste of a ticket. But when you start to remember films, obviously they're quite key on how you develop and what kind of things you're interested in as you get older. And The Incredibles is probably the main reason that so many people like superhero films, and that things like Marvel have such a kind of an affinity within kind of attaching to the audiences, and the audiences attaching to the films, because we have that something like this that we like, and it really kind of sets superheroes in a really realistic setting. And it's also quite political as a film, how kind of supers go to being outlawed and then turning them to kind of come out of the shadows when people need them. And it just works really well. It's a really compelling story, and it's kind of changing superheroes to be more human and have human problems and having bills and things and insurance to pay and bad publicity and things like that. It's really, really interesting to watch. And even as a child, those things, I don't know if they would be lost on you, but the way the characters react to the stresses, you can tell they're not happy living their boring, stressful lives, and they want to be more or less freer to express themselves. So there's lots of deeper messages in there as well. But I think, yeah, just setting a premise for the next kind of 10, 15, 20 years, like superhero films are now kind of almost as big as ever, I'd say. Kind of the end of phase 3 is kind of that pinnacle. And I suppose we're on a bit of a lull now, but they're still just as important as ever, and they're still making as much money, or more money than ever been making before. And I think The Incredibles are well, to thank for that.
I can tell this is going to be a tasty head to head two really good movies that are on a similar level. Let's get into it. All right. Categories. Performances. Obviously, we're dealing with some vocal performances here. I'm not really sure where to go with this one. I think there's some really like well placed actors in Spider-Verse. I feel like Nick Cage as the Spider Noir, and John Mulaney as the Spider-Pig in particular really worked for me, just in terms of like the aesthetic of their characters and what their kind of world represents. I thought that was really smart casting. But I think overall, The Incredibles is more memorable, I think, for what Craig T. Nelson brings to the Mr. Incredible role, both in the kind of heroic moments and the kind of frustration of his like mundane everyday life that he's going through at the start. And then also Jason Lee as a Syndrome slash Buddy is very captivating, very intriguing, not even menacing, but just kind of he's kind of like he's evil, but also just such a little dweeb at the same time. And I think Jason Lee's voice is perfect to contribute into that character. So overall, I'm going to go for The Incredibles. Also, Edna Mode, Brad Bird coming in hot with that vocal performance there. One of the funniest characters I think in any animated film I've ever seen. So yeah, I'm going to go for Incredibles for performances. Matty?
This is a very, very difficult category to pick because obviously The Incredibles has stood the test of time. And I think Into the Spider-Verse is still equally strong when you watch it now. But I don't know, it seems to have faded slightly, but that might just be because of the oversaturation of superhero films in general. Like you've already got the sequel coming out either next year or the year after. So it's already in kind of you're moving on, you're moving away. It's not as much of a one-time thing. And The Incredibles had a sequel as well. And I feel like the first one, it just had that magic about it, even though the second one was just as good. That magic was just because it was the only kind of film to that level, I think, back then. So there's going to be a slight distortion when you're trying to pick them apart. And I love Jake Johnson in Into the Spider-Verse just because of how, I don't know, he's perfectly chosen because he usually plays stoners in films, but in this he's kind of played a Spider-Man who's just been doing it too long and he's kind of lost his way, but he's still just got this really cool likableness about him and this kind of effortless skill, and just this comedy that comes to the character. That's so you can't really teach that. He has that, and I don't think many other actors could do that for the role. But then I think equally for The Incredibles, there are so many characters that just, you know, they'll always be classics, and Samuel Jackson just doing what he does best, but in almost like it's unlike his other roles. Yes, he adds a very coolness, pardon the pun, to the role, but slow on there, Leon, and Brad Bird as well. But all of these characters are really well suited. So I don't know if we revisit it in like 15, 19 years, we'd be able to kind of compare it properly. But I think The Incredibles just wins it for now. I don't know why. It's just maybe that's nostalgia coming back.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I forgot about Frozone and Samuel Jackson. Yeah, that definitely has to tilt it in that direction. Ross, are you the same? Incredibles for vocal performances?
This one's really hard for me because I think The Incredibles is the more memorable overall, as you were saying earlier, with like Craig T. Nelson just being Mr. Incredible is just so it's elite, isn't it? Like he gets the kind of emotions and everything of it's that perfect, and then yeah, I mean Samuel Jackson's Frozone is just he's Samuel Jackson. Of course, he's gonna put it off like that. Like the "Where's my super suit" scene is so iconic because of his voice almost, and that kind of thing. But I think Into the Spider-Verse, you got to like, I think it's almost you got Jake Johnson with his performance, kind of the washed out Spider-Man. I think he puts a lot into that, along with kind of you got Uncle Aaron. I can't remember who plays him. Uncle Aaron, who that's Mahershala Ali, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Who he gets kind of everything right there. Obviously, being Miles's uncle, and I can't remember who the dad is either, but he kind of gets the emotion of it all right. And Miles himself just being kind of this teenager stuck in this world that he doesn't understand, but having to do the right thing. I think every actor in that gets, or like every main actor in that gets it all on point, I think. So it is really hard to pick. But I think because of how kind of the emotional side of Into the Spider-Verse gets so perfected within it, and the actors kind of get it exactly right, I'm going to go with Into the Spider-Verse, but it doesn't matter anyway.
You're right. It doesn't matter because Incredibles goes 1-0 up. Moving on to story. Here's where I think pretty much every category is oh fuck's sake. Hiccups. Pretty much every category is tough to pick from, but story, I think I'm leaning towards Incredibles again. I think just the nature of like the kind of the struggles that this family's going through, particularly Bob or Mr. Incredible, and having to kind of adapt to this new family suburban lifestyle, not having that kind of invigorating feeling of doing hero work and everything like that, and the kind of journey that they go on as a family to unite and learn to accept each other, learn how to live in this environment. It's a really compelling, on top of all the superhero elements and the villainous plot of Syndrome and everything like that. I think it all works really well. Whereas Spider-Verse, you can't knock it. It's inspiring. It's by the when you the kind of famous quote, anyone can wear the mask, you can wear the mask. Like this encapsulates the spirit of the film as a inspirational text and inspirational journey. But I'm going for the Incredibles. A lot more layers to it that I enjoy. So there's my vote. Ross, what do you think the story?
Yeah, I think both of them at their center, I think, are say about kind of the characters rather than the story and what's going on. I think, like Into the Spider-Verse is very yeah, Into the Spider-Verse is very much about kind of Miles growing up, kind of learning to understand kind of everything that's going on, kind of dealing with his relationship with his parents and everything that's going on in his life, and just kind of the struggles of being a teenager, I guess, as well. But whereas The Incredibles is about like the family at the center, and each character has their own thing. Like Violet, kind of her struggles with being like confident, I guess, and just what like being comfortable with herself. You know, Dash being just like a kid and kid problems. Like that, he's got like an ego issue going on, which throughout the film he kind of learns that it's not about the ego. You know, and Bob as well, obviously, kind of just wanting that nostalgia and wanting it so much that he puts his family in danger and learning from that. And I think because of The Incredibles, you've got all that plus a much more captivating villain. I think Kingpin is quite forgettable in Into the Spider-Verse, which is maybe one of its only flaws, really. Whereas Syndrome is a good villain and actually, like, you know, he has the history of Mr. Incredible as well, and it's almost Mr. Incredible's not his fault directly, but it was almost his fault because of what happened in the past, why Syndrome comes back. So there's a connection there as well. So I think The Incredibles overall has to get this vote.
May, what do you think the story?
Again, this is a very close one. Incredibles definitely does well to balance lots of character struggles, as Ross says, and show how being a superhero affects lots of different people over many different ways. And some people it's a burden, and some people it's more of a something they pursue almost selfishly. I think you see that more in the second one, but that's not really relevant here. But then also Into the Spider-Verse, again, kind of briefly, but it does show multiple Spider-Mans, Spidey. Lots of superheroes dealing with the mantle of being Spider-Man or Spider-Woman or Spider-Pig, Spider-Person. So it's difficult to attach to all of them in the same way, but I think they keep some of them brief, like not Black Noir, wrong universe here. Spider Noir. What is it called?
Yeah, I think that's what he's called, isn't it? Or yeah, I
Noir
think it's Spider
Spider.
Noir. Spider
Spider
Noir.
Noir. and the pig and the other Spider-Man, they keep that quite brief and then dig in a bit more into Peter B. Parker and Miles Morales and Gwen a little bit deeper, or Gwanda, which is one of my favorite jokes from that film. So I think both do
Wakanda
that.
Forever.
Gwanda, both do that really well. But I feel I don't really want to give it to The Incredibles, but I feel like it deserves it more. So yeah, I started talking initially going to give it to Into the Spider-Verse, but I think when you kind of step back from it, it feels like not a lot's really happened. Like he's gained his self-confidence and his need to be this person and why it's important, which is really good, and being more selfless, which is great. But The Incredibles has kind of a more nuanced adventure sewn into it, I think, while developing each of the characters. And a side note, I really like how when Mr. Incredible thinks that all his family's just been blown up on that plane, and he has a chance to basically just go crazy, and then he could kill the secretary lady, and he decides not to, because even when he's at his most defeated, he just can't really do it. He can't actually turn evil. So big props to him for that. Yeah, so I'll give it to The Incredibles again, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. I think the adventure in Incredibles is more compelling. Like, as I watched Spider-Verse literally just now, and as well as like it's so impressive visually, thematically, and it's still entertaining throughout. But like the actual like beat by beat of the story isn't as quite as inventive, I think, as The Incredibles. So yeah, I think it's a good show. Also, The Incredibles, just shout out to the script. I think that's one of the big reasons I love it. But there's many films I watched a lot as a kid that I don't remember like as many of the lines and the scenes that I do from The Incredibles, and I think that's down to just how the dialogue that Brad Bird crafts, which also makes the story more realistic, more authentic. Like particularly like the scene where he comes back after the fire and the kind of confrontation he has with Helen in the living room, just like discussing like, oh yeah, you're doing this is selfish and you're gonna uproot the family again, all this kind of stuff. Like it's all really, really smart, really cool. So I think that also adds a greater depth to the story, mate.
I think, yeah, if you look at the writing in Incredibles, you realize that no film can have an excuse to have lazy writing or one-dimensional stories or anything like this. Like if you're a half decent writer, just watch some films, take some notes from how people write characters, and what those people did was literally sensational, and it's carried on. I don't know. It's just lasted forever, and it's not like they got lucky. Like that was a really well crafted. Everything you see on that screen that's said or whatever is meant to be there. Like it's placed there to develop that film, and they smashed it out of the park. And I don't understand why more films, when they're given budgets that are 4 or 5 times the amount that they were given there, they just put it into better CGI and worse characters and writing. And it really does show, I think. I'm not at anyone, but yeah, Disney Plus.
All right. Here's a category I think Spider-Verse might have a shot of getting back into this. It's 2-0 down right now. Visual style. I think watching The Incredibles, I was kind of, like I said earlier, I was just blown away by how well it's aged for a 2004 3D animated film. Like some of the way they built like the island and all the different gadgets and Syndrome's kind of lair and everything, like everything about that. The action sequences all are impeccable, really kind of mesmerizing at certain points in this film. But in saying that, Spider-Verse is the aesthetic is the kind of revolutionary thing about it. Like Ross has talked about, you guys talked about, like the kind of leaping off the page as like a comic book, the visual flourishes, just how vibrant and creative the design is, the combination of 2D and CGI animation, all that kind of stuff. That's what sets Spider-Verse apart in many ways. So I'm gonna have to give it its flowers in this category. So yeah, Spider-Verse for visual style. Ross, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the one category that does just absolutely get blown away, just because I mean, yeah, it's nothing against Incredibles. Like everything within that is really, really cool. But I think Into the Spider-Verse is not only kind of so like sleek in what it does, but it's so original. As I said earlier, like how it is just like a comic, it is watching a comic book and go into that kind of thing. How they managed to pull that off so like perfectly and like pristine. And then with kind of mixed in with the random characters from other universes, like the like a little pig man and Spider-Man Noir and stuff. There's just so much there to look at and kind of just enjoy that I think like it's got to win this category, I think.
May, do you concur?
I concur. Yeah, Spider-Man Into Spider-Verse is visually sensational. Just what your eyes are glued to the screen the whole time because you haven't really seen anything like that for ages. I think it's a perfect blend of comic and um cinema, basically. And to be honest, it's you kind of wonder why more superhero films haven't gone that way anyway, because the medium that they're all based on lends itself better to that than it does to cinema, really. And I'd love to see more of that. And I think you saw that almost slightly with the Disney Plus What If series, partially, but it wasn't as kind of more, it was more kind of just like realistic, everything. You just put like a cartoon filter on it. This was really popping and powing and everything in between. It was really good. So um everything from theme to visual style to cinematography to everything that you can think of that just is the way it looks is Spider-Man wins.
That makes it 2-1. So we go on into tone and yeah, and Spider-Verse, incredibly vibrant, incredibly fun. The humor lands, it's emotional, it's inspiring. But I think Incredibles, this has to get. I just love the kind of 70s like spy thriller that kind of takes over the film in large parts. Matt, you mentioned like the political aspects of the film, in addition to just how consistently funny and entertaining and interesting it is. Yeah, it's just hard to look past The Incredibles. I think what Brad Bird's able to execute tonally in this film, just especially compared to other superhero films, it really stands above a lot of the competition. And it's as well as being because it manages to be feel kind of sophisticated in large parts, but it's also kind of silly and fun. A lot of that is down to what Brad Bird's kind of superpower is with the little inventions that he inserts into his films. You see that in this, and you see that in his live action Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, like the little things that he comes up with to enhance the story are really, really, really fun and cool. But yeah, I do think overall as a product, The Incredibles is quite masterful in its tone, even though Spider-Verse is also very good, but not quite doesn't quite connect to me on the same level. Ross, you have any similar feelings?
Yeah, I think I mean they both really good kind of hitting the emotional tones, I think. And as I was saying, kind of like Miles growing up, like his relationship with his dad, his relationship with his uncle, etc. But I mean, and I think Peter B. Parker is also a really, really good character in that sense as well. Kind of him learning to deal with loss and grief and kind of he's depressed, he's putting loads of weight, and I think he's a really powerful character within that, which adds a lot to kind of the emotional side of things. But then, as you were saying earlier with The Incredibles, it is because it is part. I mean, Pixar always get kind of most of the time get a really good balance between making it a kids' film or making it in kind of enjoyable for adults as well. And I think this one, you've got that humor that kids can enjoy. You've got a humor that adults can enjoy as well. And then, yeah, the spy thriller aspects of it, kind of it's incredible going off in his investigation, and you're there with him, kind of wondering what on earth is going on, and yeah, but then above all, kind of the emotional side of it with his family, with the him trying to get back his like past nostalgia adds to everything pretty much. So yeah, I think pretty much the same reasons you said, The Incredibles.
May, what do you think to tone?
Ross brings up a really good point there that The Incredibles draws on or kind of draws in every kind of audience. And I suppose because Into the Spider-Verse is based on a comic medium, it'd be more suited to people who like that, like superheroes and things like that. But it does well to bring it down to a level where everyone can enjoy it and show it for why it is so good and so uniquely good compared to everything else before it. But I think that tone is far more consistent in The Incredibles and it flows far more nicely. I think it's very close because it's almost like a despondency turning into hope, which is turning into kind of like a power with Into the Spider-Verse. And The Incredibles is a more of a family film because it bases itself on core family values despite everything else. So if you take away the superhero part on both of them, they're both really well set up because the tone is what's important, not necessarily what's going on. But I'm gonna have to give it to The Incredibles just because it seems to balance it that teensy bit better. And we're really splitting hairs at this point. Actually, no, I'll give it to Into the Spider-Verse just because I'm splitting hairs and I like it.
I love the little moments in The Incredibles as well. Like kind of because it kind of like because their superheroes are outlawed, their powers kind of come into play in like more mundane everyday situations. So like the kids fighting at the dinner table, or like him lifting up the whole sofa when she's hoovering, like little touches like that also add to the kind of more grounded feel to the film. Also, the humor is just banging as well. I particularly love the in Dash's race at the end. It's kind of little like just after the day's been saved, and them trying to like stop him from going too fast to reveal that he has powers, but you don't want to be too slow, so you just lose. And then you have the guy as they're like gesturing for him to go forward, go back. The guy's face is just looking at them in complete disbelief. Really, top stuff there. And you also get the kind of like meta, like superhero commentary. Like, oh, he starts monologuing. I mean, he's talking about how feeble I am, how near my defeat is, all this kind of stuff. Really good. All right. We're now going in to unique. And I thought, you know what? There's a lot of superheroes who are working together across these two films. So who exhibited the best teamwork? In Incredibles with the family plus Frozone trying to take down the big robot at the end, and also particularly I love the bit in the jungle when they kind of reunite for the first time in a while in the film. And in Spider-Verse, you got all the different spider people, Spider Pie, uniting, collaborating, doing their thing, cooperating. Ross, what do you think in terms of where's the best teamwork in these across these two films?
Um, this one's quite hard. I mean, The Incredibles, obviously, they are a family. They all know each other well, and like really well, and kind of they know that they need to work together and do what they have to do pretty much, and they know each other's powers and whatnot. But whereas Into the Spider-Verse, I think, because it's a group of such random people who have never met before, who have to do this with each other, and at the same time, not babysit, but almost just look after and like teach Miles everything. Um, it's almost harder for them to do what they have to do. And obviously being each character being in this new world as well that they don't know that well. Into the Spider-Verse is quite they're almost opposites in that sense. So Into the Spider-Verse, I think, is quite an interesting take on this group of people that do have to work together. Because obviously, yeah, I think in most cases in like Marvel movies, everyone's worked together before, or they're already a team or whatnot, and yeah, so Into the Spider-Verse is kind of like quite a new thing, I guess, with kind of like misfits having to work together. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Into the Spider-Verse.
I'm gonna reserve judgment for another minute or so. Pass it over to May. What do you think? Who's got the better teamwork across these two films?
As in displayed or kind of intuitively, who you'd think would work better together?
The actual teamwork on display.
Okay. Well, you think the Spider-Men almost all have this inherent understanding between each other because they've all faced similar things, but all different things. They all bring unique things to the table. While they have kind of outwardly similar skill sets, they should have this understanding between each other on how they would work and how they would, operate. And I think that is shown to some degree. So there's an emotional understanding and a physical understanding of what they can do. And that variation as well is quite powerful, as you see with Miles. He's quite different to the others. But then again, the difference between that and the Incredibles. The Incredibles are quite similar. They understand themselves emotionally and physically understand each other's powers in that they're possibly also discovering new things all the time. But I think the things that they can achieve, the Spider-Men seem almost more powerful, so I'd give it to them.
Which means they're gonna get another point because Ross, before he decided to jump ship, go back to his own dimension, he's left the Zoom, is what I'm trying to say. He voted for Spider-Verse as well, so that's 2 out of the 3. I was gonna go for Incredibles. I think I just like specifically the way Brad Bird kind of the action that he shoots in terms of kind of displaying there's little like maneuvers with the characters kind of working together that I thought were really cool, particularly like I mentioned that scene in the jungle and that idea that they've never had the chance to kind of use their powers freely together as a family. That kind of added dynamic to it is what really does it for me. So I'm gonna give it to them, but that doesn't matter because it's got a point. But overall, it's a 3-2 win for the Incredibles over Spider-Verse. That's really good head-to-head though. Look, very, very competitive. One of the more competitive ones we had. One thing I forgot to mention in the tone for Spider-Verse, the music that plays when the Prowler is hunting down his victim. That's like some of the most like frightening, ominous music I've seen in any film, let alone the superhero film. It's just so like intense and overwhelming. Whenever that music plays, like I was watching it today, I found myself kind of like shuddering whenever he goes on the prowl, so to speak. So yeah, I think that's really just that bit where whoever, I don't know who did the score, but that bit of music is, I think, an ingenious addition.
Yeah, I think
to that.
if we had to look at the scores, The Incredibles is obviously very iconic. It's a very good score. But the Into the Spider-Verse, its score, when you watch it, is actually really, really good. It fits the film perfectly. The only problem is because it's by modern artists and then those songs become part of the charts and then popular music, they then obviously go out of fashion, unfortunately. So then it starts to feel dated. Whereas the Incredibles music is only ever used for Incredibles because it's not going to make on the charts because it's just a pure score. It doesn't feel dated. So I think that's probably why The Incredibles holds its theme well over time versus Into the Spider-Verse seems to have faded already now because you've over listened to that song because you can get it on Spotify and you're more likely to listen to them because they work outside the film setting.
You know what? What's the song called? What's the main song called?
Sunflower.
Sunflower. Yeah. People still listen to that now. I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like
do.
I kind of get what you're saying though. Yeah, because I feel like I would have listened to it more when the film first came out, then it kind of gets overplayed, and then you're like,
I don't know if it's like if you like really like the film Get Smart, and then you think, yeah, I'm going to play the song 4 Minutes by Madonna. You go, kind of, oh, it's kind of that's old. It's like dated.
hmm.
It's only been a couple of years, so that artist is like Post Malone is still pretty relevant. But I suppose it stands everyone's perception because you know me, I listen to like 10 songs a month, and they're the same 10 songs until I think I've listened to these too many times. So move on to the next song. That was one of the songs I just played on repeat, basically. So I'm like, I associate that song with that period of time when it's just like that was ages ago. So it feels more dated.
They should have put the Incredible score in the charts. I reckon it would have done well. Still a banger. I've been listening to that. You've seen Get Out, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
They're like music that they're like after the opening scene, it's like the Kenyan Swahili music. It's like Sikiliza, Sikiliza, like that.
Yeah.
That music. I've been just listening to that, just like casually. It's like, yeah, just chilling. Let me just whack on that music from that horror film.
I was listening to Peel break down everything that's hidden in that film, or at least everything that the fans found that was hidden in that film. And the amount of imagery in that film is insane. Like, he has to pick cotton out of the armchair to escape, and it's like an ironic thing there. And the deer as well is supposed to be a metaphor for himself. And the deer's like screaming while it's dying is done by Jordan Peele. He's the voice of the deer. So he's like, making that really weird noise. What else was there? I can't remember. And there's like a conspiracy because the mother, she's in Being John Malkovich, and there's a conspiracy theory that this is just everything's happening inside John Malkovich's head.
Yeah, that's funny because I watched Get Out again last week. That's what I was talking about, and I was thinking like they like the sunken place actually feels like Being John Malkovich.
Yeah,
and like like you kind of have obviously it's deeper like metaphorically, but like the idea of like having not being able, you still see everything, but you have no control. You're kind of just stranded in the in this place beneath. Yeah, that's funny.
And that links like his character's like struggle because he didn't react when his mum died, and he was kind of stuck in stasis, like he didn't do anything, so he feels bad about it. And he said as well, if you want to go back and watch the film, watch everything Rose does, because it's like how she doesn't let him. It wasn't obvious to me until I heard this, but like how she didn't let him give his ID to the police, not because she was like trying to show how much she cared about him. It's because they don't want him to be tracked and then be placed in that car in that area and then go missing.
Yeah,
it's mad.
Don't know how we ended up on Get Out on this head-to-head, but it's a good film. We'll have to redo that. I remember we did. Did we do that? I don't think we did that in a head-to-head. We did that in like the first iteration. We'll have to run that back at some point.
I want to watch Nope again.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that.
I tried to get.
I reckon I appreciate it more. Before we finish the head-to-head, there was one thing I wanted to mention about Incredibles. Like the device that Syndrome uses to like detect whether he survived the bomb in the cave. Like, because obviously it looks like really like bullshit the way it doesn't recognize that he's just hiding behind the skeleton or whatever. Like, it kind of annoys me. But I thought like that would have been like a nice callback if like it's like a faulty invention. It's one of his inventions that doesn't actually like work to perfection. So it would have like if there was like a line later on, he's like, oh damn it, my tracking thingy still needs further work to perfect it because it clearly didn't work because it told me that he was dead when he wasn't. I don't know. I was just looking at it. I was like, it'll be less annoying if they have like a little line like that. Otherwise, it just looks like a bullshit little plot point. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no way it would, if just hiding behind the skeleton, whether wouldn't be able to conceal him from.
But it would expect him to be like still warm, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then again, it should have detected like a heartbeat or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just looking around for the closest dead body and was like, "Yep, there's a dead body in there."
That's interesting. Yeah.
Because I think that's probably. I wasn't thinking he wasn't trying to like mask himself. He's probably just looking for like the closest. But then again, I don't know why he wouldn't know Gazer Beam would be dead in there. I'd love to see an Incredibles prequel. You know, like all the superheroes in their glory. Because I didn't really like the superheroes in the new one. They're a bit
Yeah,
dead.
yeah. I really watched that as well, and
Yeah,
I enjoyed it a bit. I thought it was a bit more, but yeah, the superheroes then they're not like the strong part.
Yeah, of course. But it's like, what did they all get killed by Syndrome? All the superheroes from that era? Because
Mm.
none came out of hiding again, apart
Yeah,
from them three.
I'm surprised there's not more Incredibles content. It must like if it was. I don't know. You just because it's Disney and they're just producing so much shit for Disney Plus
Yeah.
that you're surprised there isn't, yeah, an Incredibles prequel series on the way and this and that. Like, yeah, it's kind of mad they just did one film, wait 14 years to drop the second film.
Mm,
Kind of impressive from Disney.
maybe
Showed a bit of restraint. All right, rambled on long enough. That's the head-to-head 3-2 win. Incredibles over Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Only the most broken people can be great leaders.
His people did not call him general or king. They called him Kukul Khan, the feather serpent god. Killing him will risk eternal war.
He's coming for the surface world.
We know what you whisper. They have lost their protector. Now is our time to strike. Show them who we are.
So, welcome back to the cinema part of the podcast. We're now joined. Wait, who was here? We filmed it the other day. I can't even remember who was on the head-to-heads. Matt, you were with us, weren't you? So, Mason, you're here now with us, but Leon's not. Leon's gone. That's why I'm talking. So, well, within Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Matty, what were your initial thoughts of the film?
As in before I saw it, or while I was watching it, or after I watched it?
Well, what were your expectations?
My expectations were wait, what were you gonna say?
So, what were your expectations, and how much did it kind of live up to that? I guess.
Well, I didn't like. I knew it'd be good. I knew like they had the production level and the casting was going to be good. But then I also knew, obviously, without Chadwick Boseman, he's like the heart and soul of Black Panther by obviously being Black Panther, and obviously he brought so much more to the roles and to the film that just from a writing perspective, it might be kind of a difficult way to write the film because obviously your main focal point's gone. But then that should give it some good freedom to explore a storyline that might actually be interesting or more interesting or something that you wouldn't usually see. And in that respect, it was really good. I think they did really well with the villain and kind of balancing this kind of whole new underwater empire that it kind of makes sense that you haven't seen it before. Unlike I think a lot of the clashes in the MCU, there's stuff that they're talking about it's been around for ages, but you only hear about it now, and then after it's gone again. So the continuity is quite bad, I think. But with this, it was blended quite well. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think it was a bit slow with the pacing, kind of in the first kind of 2/3. But it's still all interesting, just because I was already invested, and it's quite an emotive story, I think. And they really did well, not just kind of throwing loads of money at it and just putting lots of action in and hoping that it'd be good. But the writing actually makes a lot of sense, and obviously a lot of time's gone into it. So for that, I rate it. It could have been a lot worse. But obviously, I think the first one was still better, just because it has that soul that we like better from it.
Yeah, I think the first one's superior in my eyes as well. But I think a big respect to Ryan Coogler, because he pretty much wrote the second one. Also, he wrote it with Chadwick Boseman, and obviously tragically passing, he had to pretty much rewrite this one. So obviously with that happening, you've got kind of Angela Bassett and Letitia Wright stepping up into the kind of main roles. And yeah, Mason, how do you think they dealt with that, and what do you like? Do you think that worked well, the story?
Yeah, it didn't really feel unbalanced or anything like that. And although you're used to this being a Chadwick Boseman film, I think you transition over to the other two characters being the main quite seamlessly. I quite like how they deal with kind of the loss and everything like that. And yeah, obviously you have the whole grief going throughout the entire film, but you still get to learn a lot more about the characters to where it makes sense for them to be the lead. I didn't feel like it was particularly weak, the film, without having Chadwick in it. So yeah, I did enjoy it. It just felt like a different take. This felt like this should be like, say, the fourth Black Panther film, kind of similar to like Captain America, where it feels like we've now finished the arc of Chadwick Boseman and now it's been passed on to someone else. So it yeah, like I said, their acting was fine in it. It was kind of more of what I expected, really.
I think that this one, it's when you're looking at Phase 4, I think this is definitely one of the better ones of Phase 4. I think it's been very weak recently. I don't think there's been any good villains, particularly good villains recently. I mean, I can't. Was it Gore in Ragnarok? Not Ragnarok. Love and Thunder. He. I don't remember much about him. I remember Christian Bale was good as Gore, but I think Namor or Namor, however you say it, is he's a decent villain, but I still think having Infinity War as like the first one, having the first Black Panther at like the butt end of Phase 3, then the build up to Infinity War, and I think Michael B. Jordan was such a huge villain, and probably one of the best kind of, not even really like a more of an antagonist than a villain in it. That I think the first one was more effective in that sense. So that's where I think this one falls down. And I also think the MCU, they keep now just kind of spewing up, oh, this has been on Earth for years, and this is kind of come up underground after all these years. And I don't know how much further they can keep going with kind of just bringing up like cults from out of nowhere kind of thing. I don't really know where they're going with that, but yeah, as like a comparison to the first one, I guess, Matty, how do you think that kind of sits within that?
I don't know, because I think up until, was it 2015, 2016, when Black Panther came out, or maybe more Civil War, when it's kind of shown that Wakanda was actually really powerful. That you could have said the same thing for then. It's like, oh, it's a bit of a cop out. But then you know from the comics that Wakanda's always been like that. And then if you know from the comics, then Namor and all of I don't know what they're called. They're not Atlanteans. Was it Tapoka City or something? I don't know.
Something like that. It's basically Atlantis, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. It's Marvel Atlantis. It's basically a similar kind of revolution, I think, as well, to keep adding to Marvel, to keep it from becoming stale and adding more characters that you can essentially have more compelling plot lines to and killing off. You need to add more and more stuff in. And I don't know, it's nice that it's not all just kind of stuff from outer space. So now this kind of feels quite tribal, and that's nice. Like all the designs for the characters, the underwater people, was really good, and they proved to be quite powerful. I think they were probably too powerful. It wasn't really explained too much on why they could heal themselves so well, and I guess it was just because of they all basically had Black Panther juice, or the flower that came from the vibranium rich soil. I was going to say something earlier. Oh yeah, what Mason said, they handled T'Challa's death really well. I think they did well not to show anything, obviously, because I don't think they want to monetize that. Basically, I suppose it is a little. I mean, the film was already in the works, and they wrote it with Chadwick Boseman, so it's not like they kind of went behind his back to think, oh, because he's died, then we can make a tribute of this and make more money. It is in memory of him. And the film would have been planned if he hadn't fallen ill anyway. So I think it's really nice that it's in his memory, and that the core parts of the film and the kind of the gesture that it shows is that the revenge and getting over grief is needed to be dealt with first. Otherwise, it's just not a good thing for a person to deal with that. And I think Shuri was a really, really good lead, and I think she really stepped up for someone who might not be seen as an actress or a character to have that in mind earlier on. So obviously that's brilliant casting from beforehand, without knowing that she would need to do that. So that's one of the bits I liked most about the film.
Yeah, and there's I think Letitia Wright as well. She probably never in a million years would have expected kind of this to happen, her having to step up from basically being like a B character to being the main character, to being the Black Panther. So that like absolutely huge from her. She's smashed it out of the park, I think. I think we've been quite complimentary so far, but I think the film it still hasn't got that oomph that kind of, say, the first one or other films from Phase 3 has had. So there's definitely issues with it. Mason, where do you think some of the issues do lie?
See, I think the issues are some of the stuff that Matty enjoyed, basically. So, like it's like what you said, Ross. I feel like the last few Marvel films I've seen, they seem to discover this whole like race of people that have been alive for forever, and they've gone unnoticed, and yet now suddenly they just resurface and kind of expose themselves to the world. And yeah, it's good that it's based on Earth, but it gets a bit boring. Like now, I feel bored of this storyline already, because I felt like I've seen this already in like Shang-Chi, and it didn't really slap for me. Like it was probably done better than Shang-Chi, I think, like kind of revealing these people, but I don't know. It just misses the mark, and I feel like that's what most of the new Marvel films are doing for me, where they don't really seem to be kind of iconic or where I want to go back and watch them. They're quite forgettable, and I think it's because they seem to keep killing off the villains, and there's no real progression in the character. It seems to just be churned out for no reason. So I did enjoy that the villain does survive this film, because at least then the story's continuing into something else. But there was just a few bits I didn't really understand with the film. I saw quite a few tweets saying that they handle the death of Chadwick really well, and that this film's like a tough watch if you've ever lost someone. And I really didn't feel that with this. I thought it was quite emotional, which it was in certain moments, but I think I was kind of sold this idea that it would be really hard hitting, which I'm kind of glad it wasn't, because if it was just a very depressing film with just constant mourning, it wouldn't be good at all. But I think they could have done a little bit more. And equally as well, having the storyline of him having a son, I thought that was quite predictable. That didn't really slap for me. And as well, that with the underwater people, like you said, their powers were just kind of not really explained. And equally, they had this strange power where it was like the sonar noise they could make to make people just dive into the water. That was never explained as to how or why they could do that. Or equally, actually, sorry, the most annoying part of this film is Everett Ross, whatever his name is. His entire storyline is completely pointless. I was hoping for like a post-credit scene to, I don't know, seeing the UN go to war with Wakanda to make it make sense, but his character was like he did not need to be in this film at all. They could have easily wrote in someone else or a completely pointless person. and yeah, they added him in. Probably just have another name on the cast, but yeah, no, there is definitely issues with this film, and that's a common theme kind of throughout Phase 4. Is it Phase 4? Is it Phase 5? I don't really know.
Yeah, it's Phase 4. Yeah, I agree with that. With Everett Ross, he's kind of just there. He doesn't have to be there, and I think the whole kind of because the film's what 2 hours 45, like 2 and 3/4 hours long, and they spend a lot of time in places you might not need to, but then you still for a 2 hour 45 film, but this kind of UN story, I think, still being quite underdeveloped, and it's just kind of there and not really important to the overall what's happening. Like it could have just not been there. I think there's just problems with the kind of the continuity of how powerful actually is Wakanda. Vibranium's they're meant to have this unlimited supply of vibranium. They can do what they want. They can, they've got a whole shield around this, like around Wakanda apparently. But I think it seems quite easy how easily infiltrated they are throughout the whole thing, and I think there's no kind of continuity with how powerful they actually are. And like they get attacked and there's just like 2 airplanes in the sky and that's it, that's defending them. So yeah, and I think what you were saying earlier as well, you got that Namor. I think he's quite like it's meant to be hard hitting, but apart from that, I think that first like 10 minutes with the funeral and whatnot is really well done, and that is fairly hard hitting. But for the rest of the film, there's not too much, and I think the sun at the end was quite predictable. And yeah, I just think Namor as well, just overall was quite underwhelming, and his whole story was meant to be really hard hitting, and you were meant to really feel for him that his parents died, but I just didn't really. And it wasn't sorry, it wasn't what I kind of, especially with the underwhelmingness recently of kind of overall MCU villains, as this one is kind of continues to be the same thing. Let's move back onto the positives though, because there are some other good parts of it. I think, as we were saying, the writing's really well done. I think there are some good performances in here. Angela Bassett steps up to kind of being the queen. She steps up to that really well, I think. I like that this one kind of, after the last how the last few Marvel films have been, this one's, they've toned down like the slapstickiness of it all and kind of trying too hard to be funny almost. And I think Winston Duke deals really well with being that kind of comic relief character, as he was in the first film as well. So I think that's well done in this one. I do like as well the kind of Shuri's kind of how she's torn and ends up meeting T'Chaka, Michael B. Jordan's character. Is it T'Chaka? I think it is Michael B. Jordan's character when she takes the herb. And I think that was quite a good idea, and putting him back in that cameo, I like that. So yeah, is there anything else anyone wants to say?
I like the villain. I think having villains with more and more compelling stories, it makes you kind of get less behind the heroes and more understand why people are doing things. I think Thanos was getting really towards that, but then again, he's a bit of a lunatic. Like he could have doubled resources, whatever. But I think with this, Namor had like a real point on why he needed things to be kept quiet. Like he's 400 years old or something, and he's been protecting this place for so long, and these people look up to him, and he feels like he's the only person to have the insight to know what would happen. And I think he's kind of one of the more sensible kind of, at one point he was making more sense than Shuri was, because she was letting kind of like hate and revenge just fuel what she wanted to do. So I think he was an interesting villain, and I think the way that they didn't kill him off, which is good, because they could have, has left that open. So he's now at a point where he's going to be important later on, and it's going to be more of like, it's not like he's there to be counted on, then he can fight for them. I think he's still got his own agenda going on, so that leaves there some interesting possibilities in the future for phase 5 and 6. And I think he's a bit of a beast. And I to be fair, I kind of rate it and I don't rate it. I don't rate how he's just so strong and so powerful for basically no reason. Because basically everyone else ate the herbs, so they should be just as powerful. And when they have children, their children should be just as powerful as him. But because he was in the belly at that time, I don't know. That doesn't make sense. But I also rate it because they are respecting how powerful he was in the comics. And he's meant to be kind of like a literal beast. And in this, I think for someone who has wings on his ankles, they did it pretty well. They handled it quite ungoofishly and without any too many jokes. And I can't remember which one of you said that it's less goofy and it's less funny while still having like the light-hearted bits in there. I think that's really needed. That's what we kind of needed to have some more faith in Marvel since Love and Thunder, because that should have been, I don't know, it could have been much better than this film, but I think this one is just smashed out of the park compared to everything else that's been happening. But I think overall this phase, what have we had? I suppose if you're only looking at films, Multiverse of Madness, that's been really good. And then this one's been kind of like a solid addition just to keep things going. What other phase 4 films have we had?
Eternals.
Spider-Man was sick. Eternals, I rate Eternals, even though most people don't.
Yeah, most people. I mean, there's all the series as well. I think there's Shang-Chi and then all the series as well. I think there's
Yeah, but I think also I can see what you mean. It's another nail in the coffin of just another whole Eternal people who have been protecting for so long. But I think Eternals make more sense because they were only active more like a couple thousand years ago when they were getting rid of all of the weird dog things.
Symbiotes, was it something like that? I can't remember.
Deviants, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
But once they were all gone, they were like, cool, we do nothing, we're just going to watch. And that's what they did. So then that makes sense, I guess. But it would be nice to have not necessarily Easter eggs, but more of a kind of underlaying plan in phases like 2 and 3. So in phase 4, it's not like, oh my God. I mean, I suppose the Legends of the Ten Rings, that was set up in Iron Man 3. But it's thought you kind of threw it away and just pretended it was made up. And then it turns out it was it's a bit kind of catfishy. But I think with the other things like this, there could be a bit more groundwork so it doesn't feel so kind of like, oh great, another world-ending disaster. But then I rate it wasn't the end of the world. I suppose they were threatening the end of the world in this, but it's still a relatively small scale thing. But I agree with what Mason says. They're supposed to be this all-powerful nation, and they took like 60 guys to go fight this army that are supposed to be like infinite. So there's good and bad, but mostly good. Like as a casual watch, I think it's pretty decent. We're far away from like end game level stuff, but I think we will be until we get to like phase 6 again, or at least Secret Wars, so phase 5. But we'll see.
Yeah. So I think in terms of the grand scheme of kind of MCU, it's probably pretty mid in terms of where it would lay, but I think, and definitely not as good as the first one, but I think in terms of the like phase 4, it's hard to see where it affects the direction of phase 4 just because fuck knows what's going to happen. I think we're so early on, like no one probably, how would anyone have guessed when the first Avengers film came out that would have led up to kind of this whole Infinity War thing? Like I think we knew like Thanos was hinted at, but for it to build up for like 9 years or whatever it was to build to that, so they must be planning something going somewhere. It's just where it goes, I guess. So yeah, go on.
One more point just to annoy Mason and keep him here longer. I would say the way it gracefully handled having multiple female leads really well in this film, and it wasn't really in question, because I know they've tried to have moments in other films where it's kind of like, yeah, girl power is really good, and it just comes off really painfully forced. And this, it was very natural and really good writing. It was just kind of what was expected to happen, and it works really well. So I like that a lot. I want to see more of that where it just makes sense and it's not like that no one made a point of it. Oh, you're a woman, you're not going to be able to. It was just kind of, it was natural, and she was respected for it as well. So more of that, please. So that's cool.
Yeah, because I think there's, for example, like in Endgame when suddenly all the women roll up and all the men step aside while the women are fighting. That's kind of done wrongly, but this film is done right in terms of that what they're trying to do there, and I think that is helped by the performances as well of Letitia Wright and Angela Bassett being kind of they really hold the screen when they're on there, especially Angela Bassett. I wouldn't be surprised if either of them kind of did get Oscar nominated, but eventually. But yeah, so if that's everyone all done, yeah. So Leon Waite 98 at Twitter, at Corona Cinema on Instagram, and I don't have up what next week films are. We're doing James Bond, Sean Connery movies, Dr. No versus Goldfinger, and that directly links into Disenchanted doing that. So no, it doesn't. That is what we're doing as the main film, as the main review, which I think is coming out on Disney Plus. So yeah. Until then, go well.
Cheers.
Cheers.
You hate Mason's mic so much.
Is it your AirPods?
It's bad right
Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using my AirPods.
Can't tell.
Oh no. Ugh.